Have you ever noticed that most people don't actually decide how rich or poor they become in one big moment, but in a series of very small decisions that feel completely harmless at the time? A car payment that feels reasonable. A slightly nicer apartment because you deserve it after work. A phone upgrade that only adds a small monthly fee. A credit card balance that you tell yourself you'll clear next month. Individually, none of these choices looks dangerous. In fact, they feel responsible, normal, even financially stable. But when you step back and look at them together, something subtle starts to appear. Your income stops feeling like income. It starts feeling like a subscription system you're working to maintain. And the strange part is, most people don't realize this shift is happening until years later. Let's look at a very ordinary example. Imagine someone in the United States or Europe in their late 20s or early 30s. A young professional. Stable job. Decent education. Nothing extreme in either direction. Their monthly after-tax income is around $3,500 to $4,500 or euros. We'll use $4,000 for simplicity. On paper, that sounds like enough to build a comfortable life. Now let's break down how that money quietly gets assigned before they even feel it. Rent or housing is the first major commitment. In most cities across the US and much of Europe, a modest one-bedroom apartment can easily cost $1,400 to $1,800. Let's say $1,600. That leaves $2,400. Next comes the car payment. Not necessarily a luxury car. Just something reliable, something modern, something that doesn't feel like a compromise. Around $400 per month, sometimes more when insurance is included. Now we're at $2,000. Then student loans. For many people in the US, this is unavoidable. In Europe it may be lower, but still present for some. Let's say $250 per month on average. Now we're at $1,750. At this point, we haven't even talked about food, transport, subscriptions, insurance, or basic daily spending. But already, a pattern is forming. A large portion of income is already spoken for before the month really begins. Now here is where something interesting happens psychologically. The remaining money doesn't feel like what's left to save. It feels like what's left to live on. So when life naturally expands into that remaining amount, restaurants, Amazon orders, small upgrades, weekends out, it doesn't feel like financial damage. It feels like normal living. And this is where monthly payments quietly take control. Because each individual commitment is framed as affordable. But together, they define your entire financial range. Let's slow this down with simple math. If our person earns $4,000 per month and has already committed roughly $2,250 in fixed payments, that's over 55% of their income locked before they make a single flexible choice. That remaining $1,750 is where everything else comes from. Food, transport, health insurance gaps, social life, emergencies, travel, gifts, random expenses that don't repeat but always appear. Now imagine something slightly more realistic and even more subtle. Over time, income increases. Maybe a raise. Maybe a job switch. Now they earn $4,800 instead of $4,000. It feels like progress. But instead of financial breathing room, something else happens. A slightly better apartment. A newer car. A more comfortable lifestyle baseline. And slowly, fixed monthly payments rise from $2,250 to $3,000. So even though income increased by $800, fixed obligations increased by $750. The gap barely changed. This is the part most people never notice. Lifestyle expands not in dramatic jumps, but in carefully justified monthly increments. A slightly higher rent because location matters. A slightly higher car payment because safety and reliability. A few more subscriptions because they're only a few dollars. Each decision is rational on its own. But together, they create a structure where income is not building freedom, it is maintaining stability. And that brings us to the real hidden mechanism behind monthly payments. They don't just measure what you can afford today. They define what you are allowed to become tomorrow. Because once fixed obligations rise, your financial flexibility shrinks in a way that feels invisible. You can still live your life. You can still make choices. But fewer of those choices reduce pressure. Most of them just manage it. Now let's talk about the psychological reason this system is so effective. Human beings don't evaluate long-term financial consequences emotionally. We evaluate monthly comfort. A $400 car payment does not feel like $4,800 per year. It feels like manageable monthly cost. A $1,600 rent does not feel like $19,200 per year. It feels like this is what apartments cost now. This mental framing is powerful because it removes scale. We stop thinking in years and start thinking in billing cycles. And billing cycles are always easier to justify. There is also another layer: identity. Most people don't just choose a car or an apartment. They choose what kind of person they believe they are. A reliable professional needs a reliable car. A successful young adult needs a certain type of living space. A socially active person needs flexibility to go out. So spending is rarely framed as consumption. It is framed as alignment with identity. And once money becomes tied to identity, it becomes much harder to question. Because questioning it feels like questioning yourself. Now let's look at what happens over a longer period if nothing changes. Imagine 5 to 7 years of this pattern. Income increases gradually. Let's say from $4,000 to $5,500. On paper, that looks like upward mobility, but fixed monthly obligations also rise. New lease. New car upgrade. Higher insurance. More subscriptions. Maybe even supporting a slightly more expensive lifestyle for a partner or family. Now fixed costs are around $3,000. That means even at a higher income, financial flexibility is still only around $1,700. And here is the key insight. Despite earning more, the person does not feel significantly closer to financial independence. They feel slightly more comfortable, but not fundamentally freer. They are still one unexpected expense away from stress. Still planning the month around obligations. Still thinking in terms of what's left. This is why so many people describe feeling stuck even when their career is going well. Not because they are failing financially, but because their financial system is designed to expand obligations along. Now, let's shift perspective for a moment and look at how financially stable people often behave differently, not in a dramatic or extreme way, but structurally. They tend to treat monthly payments with caution, not excitement, because they understand a simple principle. A monthly payment is not just a cost. It is a reduction in future freedom. So instead of asking, "Can I afford this monthly payment?" they quietly ask, "What does this do to my next 5 years of flexibility?" This changes decisions in subtle ways. Sometimes it means choosing a slightly less impressive apartment. Sometimes it means delaying a car upgrade. Sometimes it means keeping fixed costs intentionally lower even when income rises. Not because they are restricting their life, but because they are protecting their optionality. And optionality is what most people actually want when they say they want financial freedom. It is not about luxury in the present moment. It is about not being locked into maintaining a specific lifestyle to keep life stable. Because once stability depends on high fixed costs, life becomes more fragile than it appears. A job change becomes risky. A career break becomes impossible. A financial setback becomes much harder to absorb. Even small decisions start to feel heavier. Now, this is not about rejecting comfort or avoiding all commitments. That would be unrealistic. It is about understanding the structure you are building when you accept each monthly obligation. Because each one adds a small layer of permanence to your life. And over time, those layers form the boundaries of your financial world. So the real question is not are monthly payments bad? The question is, do they reflect a life you are consciously choosing, or a life that gradually assembled itself while you were just trying to live comfortably? There is no dramatic conclusion here.
No żaden transformation.
Just a clearer way of seeing what is already happening. Because once you see monthly payments as design choices rather than harmless numbers, you start to notice something important. Freedom is not only about how much you earn. It is also about how little of it you have already promised away before the month begins. If this perspective made you think differently about everyday financial decisions, you can subscribe for more calm, reality-based breakdowns like this.